You may think you understand how horror operates, where it begins, where it ends, and how safely it remains inside the frame. But some films have a way of extending themselves beyond their borders, slipping into the imperfections of the broadcast itself. In their earliest airings, certain horror movies didn't just frighten audiences with their stories, they disrupted the signal carrying them. Voices appeared that weren't recorded, images flickered that weren't captured, moments surfaced that should not have existed. Those who watched these first transmissions described the anomalies with the same mixture of confusion and dread. Whispers that drifted beneath dialogue, frames that buckled at the exact instant tension peaked, patches of static that seemed timed with uncanny precision. Engineers reviewed the masters over and over again, searching for rips, corruption, or mechanical fault. Nothing surfaced. The disturbances were exclusive to the live broadcasts, as if the signal itself had participated in the fear. Tonight, we're stepping into those strange thresholds where fiction seemed to push back. 15 horror films whose earliest broadcasts carried inexplicable distortions, moments that felt less like accidents and more like phenomena unfolding in real time. These are stories where the boundary between narrative and medium weakened, where unseen forces blurred with the crackle of transmission. Listen closely, watch the edges of the frame. What slipped through once might slip through again. Let's enter the quiet tremor inside the static. Fact 1. The Legend of Lizzie Borden, 1975. The legend of Lizzie Borden dramatizes one of America's most infamous cases, but its premiere broadcast contributed a layer of unease the filmmakers never intended. Throughout tense sequences tied to accusation and memory, viewers witnessed split-second intrusions, blurred movement, skimming across doorways, shadows crossing halls where no actors stood, and flashes of imagery that flickered too quickly to register consciously yet strongly enough to unsettle. Engineers reviewed all logs and found the master print flawless. No splicing errors, no foreign footage, no failed broadcast relays. Yet the mysterious signal bleed appeared only during emotionally charged scenes, as if the story's unresolved truth leaked through the broadcast like a suppressed confession. These intrusions vanished in reruns, never to be replicated. They remain an anomaly preserved only in memory, impossible to verify, impossible to dismiss. The result was a fusion of dramatization and inexplicable interference, crafting a version of the film that existed solely for one audience, one night. In that fleeting broadcast, Lizzie Borden didn't just tell a story about fractured perception and guilt, it enacted it. The bleed-through felt like something insisting to be seen, if only for a fraction of a second, before retreating behind the veil of fiction once more. Fact 2. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, Demon in Lace, 1975. Though technically an episode of a cult series, Demon in Lace secured its mythic place in broadcast folklore thanks to a series of anomalies during early regional airings. Viewers noted that the episode's music, normally steady, orchestral, and formulaic, began to bend slightly out of tune whenever the demon manifested. The notes wavered, as if pulled downward by an invisible weight. When engineers reviewed the audio, every track was clean, but during the broadcast, the pitch distortion felt intentional, like the soundtrack itself recoiled from the creature on screen. Some viewers reported a faint scraping sound buried beneath the warped cues, reminiscent of a stylus dragging across vinyl, an impossibility given the medium. The episode's storyline revolves around deceptive appearances and forces that slip between the visible and unseen. The broadcast glitch perfectly echoed this tension. For a moment, the episode didn't just portray possession, it seemed to become possessed, its own audio bending in acknowledgement of the entity within the narrative. It never happened again, but those who heard it insist the episode wasn't simply watched that night, it performed something. Fact 3. The Stone Tape, 1972. The Stone Tape is a film obsessed with the idea of memory trapped in physical space, replaying itself like a wound that never healed. During its earliest broadcasts, that theme manifested unexpectedly. Viewers reported sudden, needle-sharp bursts of static whenever the research team intensified their sonic experiments in the haunted chamber. The interruptions were brief but surgically precise, appearing only at the instant the characters attempted to probe the unseen. Technicians found the master copy immaculate, with no audio corruption or mechanical artifact. The anomaly existed solely in transmission, as though the haunted room depicted in the film sent a pulse outward when the characters pushed too close to its secrets. Some who watched described the static as an answer, a short, involuntary reply, erupting through the soundscape the moment the characters confronted the trauma embedded in the walls. The result was a chilling symmetry. The film that theorizes hauntings as echoing residues inadvertently created an echo of its own outside the narrative. The static felt less like a malfunction and more like a message, delivered in a language of interference. For those who witnessed it, the stone tape became more than a story. It became an experiment that spilled into the room where they watched, collapsing the distance between fiction and the viewer's reality for a heartbeat that no recording could reproduce. Fact 4. The Ash Tree, 1975. The Ash Tree, adapted from the haunting prose of M.R. James, tells a story of ancestral guilt rooted quite literally in cursed ground. But during its earliest BBC broadcast, the cursed tree at the center of the tale introduced a visual anomaly of its own. Viewers reported a gentle but unmistakable ripple moving across the screen whenever the tree dominated the frame. The distortion looked like heat shimmer at first glance, but it pulsed with a slow, deliberate rhythm unrelated to lighting or camera movement. Engineers later proposed temperature fluctuations in the transmission line, but that explanation fell apart when they examined the recorded signal. No ripples appeared in the stored footage. The anomaly existed only in the live broadcast, and only in scenes where the ash tree stood motionless, looming in silence. Some viewers recalled the ripple revealing faint shapes within its movement, fleeting contours that vanished too quickly to interpret. Whether tricks of the eye or something stranger, the effect amplified the story's ideas of lingering curses and histories that refused to stay buried. In that first airing, the tree didn't feel like a prop. It felt sentient, reacting to being observed. And for a moment, the screen seemed to breathe with it, an uninvited reminder that some stories don't just depict hauntings, they carry remnants of them. Fact 5. The Possessed, 1977. During its first television premiere, The Possessed displayed an auditory disturbance that unsettled both viewers and technicians. In scenes involving prayer, exorcism, or invocation, a piercing layer of static bled into the soundscape, thin but unmistakably intrusive. The phenomenon did not appear on any review of the master tape. It surfaced only in the transmission, as though the act of broadcasting had triggered a resistance from the film's subject matter. The static didn't erupt chaotically. Instead, it rose with the momentum of each ritual, almost anticipating the character's pleas. Some viewers claimed they heard faint syllables beneath the noise, tones that mimicked speech but dissolved before meaning could form. Engineers insisted it was interference, yet none of the machinery reported abnormalities, and the timing was far too targeted, syncing perfectly with moments of spiritual tension. In a narrative that examines possession and invisible conflict, the broadcast anomaly transformed the viewing experience. The film no longer felt like a self-contained depiction of spiritual warfare. It felt like the struggle had infiltrated the signal itself. The static seemed less like a flaw and more like a pushback, an unseen presence trying to drown out the scenes invoking it. When the film aired again, the distortion vanished. But for those who watched that first broadcast, The Possessed lived up to its name in more ways than one. Fact 6. The Norliss Tapes, 1973. The Norliss Tapes was designed as a pilot for a supernatural investigation series, but its earliest broadcast carved out its own legend. During those initial airings, viewers noticed a strange tremor in the audio, an eerie, fluttering distortion that rippled beneath every moment the titular tapes were played on screen. It wasn't static, nor was it a simple analog dropout. It carried a cadence, a fragile rhythm that suggested someone or something whispering too softly to decipher. Engineers reviewed the master recording afterward and found no anomalies. The interference existed only during transmission. In the story, the tapes contain the fragmented accounts of a missing writer unraveling occult mysteries. That broadcast anomaly gave the sense that something inside those taped confessions was trying to cross the barrier between fiction and viewer. The distortion appeared only when the tapes were rewound or played within the film, never during ordinary scenes, creating a precision no technical malfunction could convincingly explain. Audience members described the sensation as if the signal itself were fraying at the edges, straining under the weight of whatever knowledge the writer had captured. Thematically, The film deals with the fragility of truth in the presence of the supernatural. Through the glitch, the broadcast became part of the story, pulling viewers into the investigation whether they wanted to be or not. Whatever stirred inside the Norless recordings may have been fictional, but the broadcast made the whisper Fact 7 Don't Look Now 1973. Don't Look Now is renowned for its hypnotic visuals and its symbolic use of the color red, but its earliest art house screenings revealed a momentary phenomenon that even seasoned projectionists couldn't explain. During several key scenes, all colors except red drained from the frame for a fraction of a second. The effect was abrupt, too short to be intentional, too targeted to be random. Technicians who inspected the reel afterward confirmed the print to be flawless, with no fading or chemical imbalance. The anomaly appeared exclusively during scenes where red imagery played a central emotional role. Viewers described the shift as though the film were sharpening its focus, insisting attention on the color's symbolic weight. The sudden bleed of monochrome created a heightened sensation of precognition, as if the story were revealing glimpses of a truth the characters could not yet grasp. Projectionists experienced another oddity, a subtle dimming of the projector lamp at the exact instant of desaturation. Despite voltage readings remaining consistent, it was as though the equipment itself reacted to the film's emotional pulse. The effect did not repeat in later screenings, leaving only the memory of those fleeting moments where the film's thematic tension manifested directly through light and color. For those few who witnessed it, the desaturation didn't feel like a glitch. It felt like a warning delivered through the image itself, a whisper in visual form. Fact 8. Dark Night of the Scarecrow 1981. When Dark Night of the Scarecrow first aired, its rural vengeance tale already carried an oppressive sense of dread, but the broadcast added an entirely new layer of unease. During scenes where the Scarecrow stood perfectly still, silent, immobile, and foreboding, a low, resonant hum seeped into the transmission. It wasn't present on the original print, nor did the studio include any such sound in the design. Yet viewers described feeling the vibration as much as hearing it, a pressure that settled behind the ears like a warning. The hum didn't randomly fluctuate. It followed the Scarecrow's appearances with unnerving precision. Every time the figure dominated the frame, the atmosphere thickened, as though the broadcast wasn't simply carrying the film, but responding to it. Technicians blamed environmental interference, but none of their equipment registered abnormal activity. What the film explores, a wronged spirit returning through a vessel of silence, was amplified by the broadcast anomaly. The hum transformed the Scarecrow from a passive symbol into an active presence, something reaching beyond the screen to observe the audience. During reruns, the hum was gone, leaving those first viewers with an experience no one else would ever hear again. In that brief moment, the story's quietest figure felt alive, watching from the spaces where sound and silence overlap. Fact 9. The Screaming Woman 1972. The Screaming Woman was expected to be a suspenseful but straightforward TV thriller, yet its premiere broadcast delivered something no production team anticipated. Viewers reported hearing a second voice, thin, distant, and unmistakably human, shadowing the lead actress's cries. It wasn't louder than the dialogue, but it carried a chilling timbre, as though someone far beneath the mix was begging to be heard. When technicians combed through the audio track, they found no irregularities. The master tape was pristine, without a trace of the ghostly resonance that audiences describe. The film's story revolves around a woman who believes she hears someone trapped underground. The phantom voice during the broadcast aligned uncannily with the narrative's tension, enhancing the sense that something buried was clawing for attention. Some viewers thought the sound was an artistic flourish. Others insisted it was too raw, too distressed, to be scripted. What makes the anomaly especially unsettling is that it never resurfaced. In every subsequent airing, the audio played cleanly, without a single bleed, echo, or tremor. The strange harmony of fiction and unexplained interference vanished as abruptly as it appeared. For those who experienced it live, the second scream wasn't interpreted as a glitch. It felt like the broadcast channel had briefly opened to something beyond the story, a moment where the film's underlying fear escaped into the real world. Sometimes the most haunting cry. Fact 10. Don't Go to Sleep 1982. Don't Go to Sleep already unsettles through its portrait of suburban grief, yet its first televised broadcasts delivered an unexpected layer of dread. During moments of heightened emotional conflict, the screen abruptly shifted to a blank gray field for several seconds, while a thin, distorted whisper of audio lingered beneath the silence. It was subtle but deeply unnerving, less like a technical drop and more like a pause imposed by something inside the story itself. Technicians examined the footage afterward and found no dropped frames or damaged sections. The anomaly had existed only in the broadcast chain. What made it particularly disturbing was its timing. Each grayout occurred at a psychological breaking point, mirroring the character's internal fractures. Audience members described the gray field as watchful, as if someone or something was staring back through the interruption. When networks attempted a replay later that same week, the film ran clean, without a single disruption. Thematically, the film deals with suppressed memory and emotional voids. The grayouts made those voids literal, forcing viewers to experience the same disorientation the characters felt. For those who witnessed it live, the anomaly became a part of the story, an unplanned intrusion that made the film feel aware of being observed. Fact 11. The Power, 1984. The Power centers on an ancient Aztec amulet that influences the world in ways its characters cannot fully grasp. But early test airings of the film suggested the amulet's reach extended beyond the story. Broadcast monitors registered nothing unusual, yet viewers consistently reported a soft, low-frequency vibration humming beneath scenes in which the amulet appeared. It wasn't loud enough to disrupt dialogue, but it carried a peculiar resonance that made the air feel weighted, as if the room itself was responding to the artifact on screen. Audio engineers scanned the master tape repeatedly. No interference, no corrupted frequencies. Still, during transmission, the hum rose and fell in precise alignment with the object's presence. For some viewers, the sensation bordered on physical pressure behind the eyes, a faint tightening in the jaw. The film explores themes of control and the unseen forces that manipulate human lives. The broadcast anomaly intensified those ideas, making the amulet feel sentient, reactive. Instead of simply being a prop within the narrative, it became a presence that seemed aware of each viewer, pressing against the barrier between fiction and reality. Later broadcasts played without issue, leaving the hum as a singular phenomenon, an echo of a moment when the film's central curse felt frightful. Fact 12. The Next Victim, 1971. The Next Victim entered European broadcasts as another atmospheric giallo, but its first television airings carried an anomaly that turned an already tense thriller into something far more disorienting. During the film's opening murder set piece, audio and image drifted out of sync in a way technicians struggled to categorize. The killer's footsteps echoed seconds before the figure appeared, while the victim's scream lagged unnaturally behind, distorting the emotional cadence of the sequence. When broadcasters reviewed the master reels, everything was perfectly aligned. The glitch had existed solely within the live transmission. Witnesses described hearing faint breaths threading through the ambient noise, soft enough to question but distinct enough to disturb. These sounds were not found on any version of the film. The delay created a fractured rhythm that didn't mirror typical desynchronization. It felt ritualistic, almost as if the moment was being stretched by an unseen force. The film's narrative depends on unstable perception and concealed truths, and the anomaly unexpectedly deepened those themes. The broadcast behaved less like a malfunction and more like a deliberate reordering of events, time bending around the violence in a way that echoed the story's fractured psychology. In retrospect, the glitch feels less like a technical accident and more like the signal itself was manipulated by the tension unfolding on screen. For a brief moment, the audience wasn't just watching a murder, they were Fact 13. Haunts, 1976. Haunts is a quiet, brooding thriller built on fractured memory and rural unease. Its limited theatrical screenings in the mid-1000s, 970 seconds, were sparsely attended, but the film's reputation grew because of one peculiar phenomenon: abrupt frame snaps that occurred only during certain emotional crescendos. Projectionists reported that the image would jolt forward, skip a fraction of a second, or ripple like a disturbed surface, yet the film reels themselves showed no physical damage. These disruptions happened exclusively during scenes in which the protagonist confronted memories she could neither articulate nor escape. Viewers described glimpsing shapes in the split-second blur, forms that felt human but indistinct, more like impressions than figures. The images never appeared in any inspected frame and could not be reproduced in later screenings. The effect was eerily synchronous with the film's subject matter. Haunts deals with trauma that resurfaces unpredictably, manifesting in ways the mind struggles to interpret. The projection anomalies echoed that internal fragmentation perfectly. Instead of simply watching the story, audiences felt as if they were falling into its damaged psychology. When the film was eventually transferred to home video, the phenomenon disappeared entirely, leaving the distorted screenings as isolated events witnessed by a handful of audiences and dismissed by technicians as temperature shifts or projector fatigue. Yet none of those explanations account for the precision of the timing. In that brief period, the boundary between the film's fractured interior world and the external reality of its viewers seemed to blur. The screen didn't merely Fact 14. The Cat Creature, 1973. When The Cat Creature debuted on television, it arrived as a small, atmospheric thriller steeped in ancient relics and nocturnal dread. But what should have been a routine late-night broadcast quickly spiraled into something more peculiar. During scenes set in dim corridors and shadowed hallways, the picture deepened beyond its intended exposure. Entire shapes vanished into inky darkness, shadows that did not exist in the original footage. Technicians examining the film afterward found no discoloration, no faulty bulbs, no transmission irregularities. Yet during the initial broadcast, viewers insisted they saw movement in the darkest corners, indistinct forms pacing behind the actors, silhouettes emerging for a split second before dissolving. None of these figures appear in the surviving copies. The Cat Creature's story revolves around a stolen artifact tied to an ancient curse. The unplanned blackouts felt almost thematic, as though the narrative's supernatural energy had seeped into the broadcast. The disturbances aligned uncannily with the creature's on-screen presence, as if the signal itself recoiled every time the relic's power stirred. When the film re-aired weeks later, the shadows no longer expanded. The scenes remained clear, the lighting stable. Whatever visitors haunted that first transmission did not return. Yet those who witnessed the anomaly still recall it vividly, not as a technical malfunction, but as an intrusion, something slipping between frames, revealing itself in the shelter of the broadcast's softest darkness. Sometimes, the scariest presence isn't the one the film intends to show. It's the one that appears only when the signal wavers. Fact 15. The Spell, 1977. The Spell was intended to be a straightforward supernatural TV thriller. Yet its premiere quickly became the subject of broadcast lore. Viewers tuning in for the first airing reported an unsettling distortion only minutes into the film. As the opening chant unfolded, the audio warped into a metallic vibration, low, resonant, and completely absent from the master tape. Engineers combed through every inch of the audio track afterward, expecting a damaged reel or misaligned sound bed. What they found instead was nothing. Clean, crisp audio without a trace of interference. The film centers on a tormented teenage girl whose bitterness and humiliation express themselves through mysterious forces she can barely control. On the night of its broadcast, those forces felt as though they reached outward, leaking into the signal itself. Several viewers claimed they heard a hush of whispered syllables overlaying the mother's lines, phrases that never appeared in the script. Others described the distortion as intentional, as if the film exhaled its own anger in a form the equipment couldn't contain. ABC eventually blamed the phenomenon on a short-lived modulation imbalance. Off the record, technicians admitted the timing was too precise to be random. The distortion appeared only in scenes tied to the girl's growing power, never outside them. When the film aired again months later, the anomaly was gone, leaving no physical evidence of what so many had heard. The Spell already touches on the dangers of resentment left to fester. But in its first broadcast, the theme became unnervingly literal. The anger at the heart of the film seemed to echo outward, bending the signal around its most volatile moments. The greatest horrors are sometimes not in the bonus film. Fact 16. The Vanishing Room, 1988. Before we bring this descent to a close, here's one more horror film you should add to your list. The Vanishing Room never became widely known, but its earliest regional broadcasts carved out a reputation far stranger than its limited theatrical life. The film follows a couple who inherit a decaying boarding house, only to discover a particular upstairs room that appears and disappears, as though governed by its own logic. Yet it was the broadcast, not the narrative, that people remembered. During those first transmissions, viewers described a translucent preview of the room, a faint, empty frame flickering a fraction of a second before the actual scene began. It was subtle but unmistakable, like the room was stepping into view before the actors arrived. Technicians reviewing the master copy afterward found no extra frames, no dissolves, no transitions gone wrong. The anomaly existed only in the live broadcast, never again repeating in reruns or home releases. The ghost frame aligned uncannily with the film's oppressive sense of spatial instability. In a story where architecture bends around emotion, the broadcast distortion felt like the building announcing itself, revealing its true shape before the narrative caught up. Viewers described feeling expected, as though the room acknowledged their presence before allowing them inside. That fleeting distortion transformed the film into something more participatory. For those who witnessed it, the vanishing room was no longer. If these distorted broadcasts and fractured signals drew you deeper into the shadows, stay close. There are many more forgotten corners of horror waiting to surface. Each glitch hints at something lingering just outside the frame, something that reveals itself only when the signal falters. Now tell me, which disturbance unsettled you the most? And do you believe these anomalies were accidents or brief moments when the